Ambassador Sondland. I only have 10 fingers and 10 toes, so I can't count above 20, Mr. Castor. But you know how many times Ambassador Sondland said that he did not know, did not recall, had no recollection, had limited memory, or failed to remember something in his October 17th testimony? You know how many times? 325. Does that surprise you? 325.
Big number.
And then he files a clarifying statement, and he clarifies a few things, I guess. But did you have any do you have any contact with Ambassador Sondland between the time of his deposition and the time of his clarifying statement?
No.
Did the majority?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. So they may have had influence on his testimony.
I did.
And that would be evidence of bias. That would be evidence of credibility. That would be evidence that we should take into account before. But we'll never know, will we? Because the majority counsel has a right to assert a privilege as to information that's relevant to this committee's decision. The majority counsel has a right to assert a privilege in any communications he has with the chairman, Adam Schiff, doesn't he? As does minority counsel. That's a privilege that we reserved here in Congress, isn't it? Yeah. And the same thing is true of FOIA. The Freedom of Information Act does not apply to memos that majority counsel writes.
Or leaks.
Isn't that true? So we've demanded that of the executive branch, but we have allowed ourselves not to be part of FOIA, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the majority has a privilege. The president also has a privilege. It's called executive privilege. He can meet with the Secretary of State, and that's a privileged conversation. He can meet with the Secretary of Defense. That's a privileged conversation. He can meet with the Secretary of Energy. That's a privileged conversation. Now, when the majority has subpoenaed those witnesses, and the president has refused to produce those witnesses or relevant documents, or what they consider relevant documents, they are charging him with an article of impeachment for obstruction. In fact, their report says, President obstructed the impeachment inquiry by instructing witnesses to ignore subpoenas. Why?
Ms. Bass.
Mr. Goldman, I want to pick up on the president.